Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode. Um, my voice is slightly off today, but hopefully I can get through this talk. Let's begin. The shadow of time. A concept arose to me, a concept that fascinated me. For me, I don't consider that sight is just something in front of our eyes. I consider that we have a sight behind our eyes. But I consider that if the sight in front of our eyes is considering an atomic existence, as considering objectivity, I identify the sight behind my eyes as subjectivity and the subjective realm. So what that means is my whole life I was under the impression I'm just one kind of thing. Then I looked at everything around me and I realized the laws of nature and the evolution of the void through the singular into the dualistic and the multiplicity of these concentric kind of spherical dimensions. I'll get into all this, but the idea is that I was wondering about kind of, it was a sight of my inner realm. I was fascinated by a subjective phenomenon, not something I was seeing in front of me, but it was something I was kind of contemplating and wondering. And I thought that we find ourselves, especially through a secular mode of thought, that we are creatures in time and space, and time is moving linearly. And so I thought, what if time is the shadow of a timeless dimension? You know, my mind entertained, and then I thought about giving this talk, The Shadow of Time. Shri Ramana Maharshi, from a very mystical angle, he gives this kind of wisdom where he says a person who goes from the sun into the shade and then goes back into the sun is a fool. And he's using this metaphor of like when you find the right thing to do and you don't do it, you're a fool. You know, when you know what is right and you don't do it, you're a fool. You know, that's you know what Marsh is saying. But on the other hand, it was we have Carl Jung from another part of the world. This incredible psychologist. He says that you have to kind of make the unconscious conscious, or it will direct your life and you'll call it fate. And so there was the concept of the anima and the animus, and even the concept of the shadow. That in life, because we are kind of, how would I say it? Like the way I would explain it is that because we're creatures, in a linguistic simulation, we're using language. That means anything that you can speak about must be in reference to something else, you know when we even read, there's spaces between the words. This means that underneath all language there is a mathematical axiom, and it means that I consider four kind of dimensions to okay, I'm jumping too ahead. Anyways, we have to become conscious, and what that means is some people don't look at their shadow, they just want to see the light 24/7. And Carl Jung was like, okay, that's impractical. Life is a sort of movement of chaos and order. This chaos, where if it just becomes too ordered, chaos will be the evolution. If it becomes too chaotic, order will be the evolution. We recognize that we were in the chaos of the food chain as a species. What that means is we were in the forest, we didn't have an extra imagination. I feel at that point the ecosystem was our imagination. The complexity hadn't come about, the complexity of the subjective realm, and so we are in some sense creatures that are running away from tigers. And just pretty much, if you asked man what he had to do when he was back in the day, he'd be like, hey man, life isn't that bad, you're just running away from beasts that want to eat you, and sometimes you got to kill them. It's like just regular life. And so we see that this human being, over a very large progression of time, you know found itself becoming responsible for its own environment. That means civilization is built on the foundational idea that the being chose to define its environment. That's really what civilization is. You think animals in the forest care if you have a suit on or not? So we brought the conditions. We pretty much, the imagination is an attempt of controlling the world behind your eyes. You know, or in some sense, stretching it. Hmm. Just a second, folks. I listen to music as I give these talks, so I'm just changing the track. There we go. So, anyways, let's continue. So, I'm just suggesting the idea of the talk is the shadow of time. I'm wondering if time could be the shadow of a greater dimension. Could temporality be the shadow of an eternal condition? I noticed that through the development of language, man found a way to separate himself from his environment. And by separating himself from his environment, internally, he created an environment. So it's kind of strange. It's like we know that we are not the objects. Like your body is physically separate than the earth. This is why, like, if you really go back in evolution, you were the earth, but now you're standing on the earth. You are in the earth. It has become a relationship of something in location. Okay, before it was just movement of location, the unconscious movement of nature, let's presume. And so, where am I going with this? Therefore, kind of like in front of our eyes, we're separate from the world, but behind our eyes, our sense of self and that sense of world are the same projection. So that's the relationship. Our sense of love and compassion and affinity for the world comes not just only on what we see externally. Sometimes it's as if it's like the hood of the car is not open, but you're seeing someone drive the car, and you think it's their hand causing the car to move. No, the hand causes the direction, but to really examine the engine would mean that the conditional language man uses to comprehend the world will have to be tested through unconditional like moments. So what does that mean? That means I have an explanation of the world subjectively. I go see that objectivity, and I see the way my mind had opened up to that reality was inaccurate. Imagine, you know. Sometimes you need chaos to even identify order. Sometimes before being a good person, you got to understand what bad is. Jordan Peterson said one of the most remarkable things. He said it's not easy being good, and he did something so tactically smart that I think it will be remembered in history. He made the good cool again, because the difference between the chaos and order is that chaos is easy, but it appears more complex. For me, it's like if you're talking to someone and one person agrees with you, okay, and one person disagrees with you, where does your attention go? Your attention goes in administering the order. you know so life is, how can I tell you, it's a transference of attention between fragmented phenomenology and singular phenomenology. And ultimately, the multidimensional and the singular are being witnessed by the void. I consider that reality is strange for the mind. That means back in the day, there's the story of Bodhidharma, the Zen master. And this guy goes to Bodhidharma, and Bodhidharma is in this deep meditation. Long story short, he scolded an emperor and went outside of the empire wall and just meditated with his face inches away from the wall so he doesn't get distracted by Maya. And so Bodhidharma is meditating, and this man one evening and one foggy night comes there, and he stays there for a while until he sees Bodhidharma come out of his samadhi meditation. And he goes to Bodhidharma, and he's nonstop, talking as if he's desperate. And he says, "Bodhidharma, help me, please help me," something like that, you know. And Bodhidharma doesn't acknowledge him at first, you know, until the guy does something intense, as the Zen story says. It's like the guy cuts his hand and looks at Bodhidharma like strangely hand in hand and says, "Hey man," he says, "Hey man, like, I'm loyal to you, help me. I can't sleep at night." Pretty much he said, "My mind is restless. My mind is restless. Help me, Bodhidharma." And before even saying his mind is restless, Bodhidharma says, "Okay." Bodhidharma grants him an audience and says, "Okay, what is it?" And the guy looks at Bodhidharma and says, "Please pacify my mind." This is the exact wording. He says, "My mind is restless. Please pacify my mind." That means there is a problem of inner significance, not outer significance. Not human beings don't just have outer problems. A person can be living in a very externally low condition, but internally they could have no problems. They could be blessed. A person could externally be living in like a billionaire's chair, but at the same time be internally stressed. So I find a strange dichotomy that it's as if, like, the less you have, the more your attention is occupied by what you have. The more you have, the more you have to be responsible for it. So it's kind of like ownership has different levels of maintenance. Anyways, Bodhidharma looks at the man and says, "Okay, you want me to pacify your mind? You want me to pacify your mind? Bring your mind in front of me right now." He tells the guy. "You want me to pacify this mind? Bring it in front of me. Put it on the table, in other words. This mind that is a problem for you, show me. Show me your mind, so I'll pacify it for you." And the guy starts looking, and he just gets this weird feeling. And he's like, "You want me to bring my mind in front of you?" It's like the guy thinks about it, and he's like, he suddenly freaks out, and he's like, "I can't find my mind." Bodhidharma looks at him and says, "There, your mind is pacified." And the guy attains enlightenment, as the story says. And I find the reason he attains that greater perception is because he realizes his problem was subjectively existent. So the moment he looked at the subjectivity like objectivity, it was non-existent. That means, imagine one day you go in a bad mood, and you're like, "Oh man, I'm useless. I can't do anything. Nobody wants me around." Like all these thoughts, imagine, come, right? Now, if you were to realistically, like how a scientist would study an object, a scientist would look at an object from different angles, test it, see what it is, see its relationship, see the different eyes that are looking at it. And so, if you were to look at that subjectivity you are adopting with the same precision, you would see that it is not, it is kind of in thin air. That's the surprise, guys. Your identity is strangely an illusion if you think you're a purely materialistic creature. That means for secular people, I think imagination, thought, identity, these are all hallucinations of atoms, are they not? So this is the thing that I feel we are strangely, we might have had a singular source, but right now, based on the evidence, based on our heartbeat, based on our blinking, based on the on and off switch effect, as I say, of the sun kind of hitting the earth, we have a dual psychology. That means I think civilization, this is a strange thing to say, but it shouldn't be one-sided. That means it was such a great one of those, like, moments. Let me tell you, one of those moments that I felt, I saw something that gave me goosebumps from my inner realms, in a good way, not goosebumps of fear, goosebumps of overwhelmment. Sometimes it's good to get overwhelmed. It shows you how much your mind can hold. Civilization, I feel, should be designed dualistically. And so what's going on is we're 8 billion beings. We want a singular notion. We want, like, one greatness for everybody, not realizing that greatness doesn't come alone. You know, greatness and its absence are there. So it's the challenge. It's the challenge of kind of how would I say it? I feel there should be our civilization should be like designed like the yin yang symbol. I call this a yin yang civilization. I've talked about it in other talks. This yin yang civilization should administer certain beings who feel their cause was material and feel their effect is immaterial, and some people who feel their cause was immaterial and their effect is material. That means the main difference between, you can say, the mindset of the physicist and the metaphysicist is that the metaphysicist is considering the potential for the cause to be purely immaterial. And when we think about immaterial things, let me tell you something cool. Did you guys know the personality is immaterial? The personality of the person is ascribed to matter, but it's an immaterial phenomenon. That means if I told you, put your personality in front of me, you'd be like, it's a subject. How do you want me to put a subject in front of you? At most you could write it or say it, but you would see it would not be an object. So what I notice is that part of reality is materialistic, and the part has to be immaterialistic, because the concept of matter does not exist alone. There is matter in space. When you understand this polarity within all conception, you'll suddenly discover the way the linguistic simulation works. And it's hilarious. It works like how our body is designed. That means language is copying the body. There is a symmetry and duality to it, and there's a unity as well. That means the same way I feel we have two eyes that see the moment, there is a subjective and objective dimension that are being the same moment, right? And the subjective dimension, for a long time, I was under the impression it's empty, it's not there. And then I asked myself, who knows there is the illusion? Who is the awareness of this? How is the simulation? How can there be something to be aware of an illusion? How can the concept of an illusion became to me non-existent? Not that there isn't illusions in life, but I'm saying the fact that the whole cosmos being a simulation, it didn't make sense anymore to me, because it appeared that there had to be something in the here. It's like first there needs to be somewhere where someone is standing, or there needs to be a standing ground of existence, right? So I realized my relationship with all the kind of metaphysical relationships I have are kind of linguistically inspired as a counter response to what language I have ascribed to matter. Because it's fascinating, right? There are some people, I don't want to say there's some people, it was like a traditional model. This model was used by many people in the world, and it was a sort of trio of the body, mind, and the soul. And the body was known, the mind was semi-known, semi-unknown, and the soul was super unknown, right? This is why when you go, just try it out, you can do this, whoever you are, go to any either religion or mystical kind of esoteric thing. You will see at the end of it there is a paradoxical secret. There is a secret in kind of, you'll see its entrances to non-dual. That means human beings are either worshiping matter. Let me say it again. They're either worshiping the unknown space or an unknown infinity, or they are not worshiping anything and they're just in a known finite realm. That means when you go look at a Zen master, and if you were to talk with a Zen master, the Zen mind attains liberation through an acknowledgement of emptiness. That emptiness first arises from an objective acknowledgement, then pours into an inner acknowledgement. So the same way the person sees, for example, how they look at an object, and that object, if they weren't, it's like that, like imagine two people looking at a cup with tea, and the tea is warm enough not to have steam. Okay, it's like at that level of warmth. So two people are looking at this cup of tea, and one of them says it's cold tea. The other person says, "Nah, man, it's like hot, like the tea is hot." Some person say they are seeing different temperatures in the same phenomena. They're extracting different views. So what does that mean? That means it's the presence of the individual that brings forth the animate character of the object. The subjective, the subject requires your attention to link to the object, in other words. So this object in front of me, it's a Tim Hortons cup. Right? But it's as if like if a person didn't know what that is, they wouldn't see that in it, right? So Buddha was saying the nature of objective phenomena is empty, and we put in the nature of the phenomena. So what does that mean? That means who can interpret an atom? It's like, what do you want? What can we say about an atom? Look at its innocence. It's just there. So it was this kind of mindset, guys, that the person could see an object and could see how the mind was imposing characteristics. So the person looked at how they kept themselves as a subject, and they realized the subjects are empty too. So that's what I'm telling you guys. This is my whole kind of intention with these talks. Because what's happening is that we are in a pre phase of external technology suddenly advancing and changing our world. That means I find myself a privilege, to be alive now. Because it's an era where the attention of the human being is not fully on what it has created. When you look at the evolution of nature, it's like the creature was in an environment where it was not responsible for. We have become so responsible for the environment that we are changing it dramatically. Like, think about it this way, guys. If God, the concept of a creator it includes creator and the creation. Okay, so if we take this concept that we were natural beings and we created an unnatural AI technology, and if that AI technology dominates us and defines us, and like the movie Matrix happens, it would be in a sense where God got devoured by his creation. You know, and what does that mean? That means it's not doesn't mean God. Like of course I'm speaking with respect to language here, guys. I am not trying to speak in a derogatory way of any culture. For me, I'm speaking conceptually here in these talks. That means for me, it's the concepts matter more than the way we see the. You can say the kind of cultural program we that acts as a lens for us to see that concept. So, anyways, this notion that a natural creator led to an unnatural creation, and then the unnatural creation took away the attention of the creator from its own nature. So, I'm saying if man got influenced by his creation, then what may one say to the ancient gods? You know? Of course, we have to consider there's many religious modes of perception here. The main acknowledgement is that God is unknown. It's like that which created knowledge is unknown, something like that. I find myself learning from my eyes, sometimes from known ways they move, sometimes from unknown ways. I was pretty much, I think, till 2011 ignoring how I knew things. I felt it was just given. A lot of things, it's like if anybody has seen the movie Enemy at the Gates, it's like Russian soldiers. Some of them were given bullets, some of them were given guns, and they were sent to the battlefield. And I kind of felt like this whole class distinction of human beings. It's like some of them are given certain resources, some of them are not given certain resources, and they're all thrown into this landscape. That means the concept of birth for me didn't was a strange concept. It was more like it wasn't birth, it was awakening into an individualized identity, that had a name, that had a body, that had a sort of was a member of a civilization, had a civilization and whatnot, right? So, anyways, your eyes are free access to the cosmos, to an existential reality. Um, I feel there's many kinds of experiences a human being goes through, and if we were to judge them as a self, which self would we go by? Imagine last year you were a saint, this year you were a sinner, and the next year you were a saint, and the next year you were a sinner. So which one are you? Imagine. So you see that the game of morality is a projection. The same way the person looks at an object and sees a meaning, that meaning is an instantaneous evocation. That means this is a unique concept that it kind of explains all the ceremonial approaches that shamans had, and all the kind of metaphysically oriented kind of uh, traditionalists had. What I'm saying is that right now we have technologies, okay? But imagine there was a ritual done back in the day where the person, the same way like I'm putting a lap, I don't know how to say it. You can even see writing as a sort of ceremony. But for me, I'm just trying to get to this point that behavior, if behavior and knowledge were two different dimensions, and the knower had nothing to do with the visible, it's kind of like the invisible awareness to a visible self means that how can the observer die? How can the observer be the object and subject? That means, like, it's kind of strange. When I look in the mirror, I notice the physical body and I notice the physicality of everything that's behind me. But I notice my eyes are staring in the mirror. And it's like we have a language that is trying to, through time, explain things, but the viewer seems like an instantaneous unknown. So, really, what my life wasn't like, I'm telling you guys, before 2011, I wasn't the kind of person I am now. If I heard myself in 2011, I probably would just not listen. Because in 2011, I felt I had to take something from the world. That was the main difference. It's like my inner realms were being misunderstood by myself because I still had a desire to have the world, to have externality behave the way I felt it should in my mind. You know. So what happened is that I realized the world is more unknown than I can know it. So it calmed me down. So believe it or not, the unknown is the greatest stress destroyer. Kind of like how Terrence McKenna says, nobody knows enough to worry. And it's true. It's true. I can totally see that the significance of action is based on before that action being intended and acting, what was the world being seen? That means before you move as a human being, wonder for yourself, what world am I seeing? What is the accuracy of this world? How much of this world needs to be defined by my external experiences? How much of it needs to be defined by just the internal witness choosing? Right? If somebody tells me, is free will objective or subjective, I will say neither. It appears as an individual making individual decisions, but the inspiration of it is like kind of like a phone receiving a signal and then you hearing the ringtone. So it's like the ringtone of our brains is the story of the world, but the where the signal is coming from, I don't feel it's a non-dual signal going through a certain biological instrumentation and coming out as a story of language. So what it is, and this is nothing new, guys. I'm saying what I'm saying is certain mystical poets. I mean, I'm saying it probably in a more modern way, but the way they said it back in the day was that it was this notion of Rumi would say it, the poet Rumi, of what is it called? The straw. There we go. So like in like a straw of hay, not a straw of hay, but like pretty much they saw themselves as flutes of the divine will. There we go. Like a flute. Yeah. They saw themselves as their individual will was like the remote control car in the hand of, and the controller in the hand of a non-dual collective unknown being. So what does that mean? They were ahead of their time. That means, okay, so let me tell you pretty much when I have scoped through kind of the kinds of subjects that have arose in the minds of human beings in history, their inspiration, so pretty much creativity is either comes across as a leaf. Imagine you threw a leaf in a river, or let me say like an apple. Imagine you had an apple in your hand and you threw this, apple in the river, and let's say it's a small apple. So you threw this small apple in the river, and you notice the river being the mind of that apple, the river being the destiny of that apple, the river moving this apple, right? Again, kind of the apple dodges all the rocks and keeps going, right? Because it is in the flow of the river. The other mentality is you are the river, you are not the apple. And that's the advanced communicator. That's where civilization is going towards. Where you realize that your mind is you. And the world is fragmented. It is fragmented through language. That means, let me tell you, this was the secret. It was in the story of Babylon. You know, the story of Babylon was all human beings were united under one language. And what is language? Ultimately, it's symbols for vision, for image. So human beings were united by one collective vision. You know, as if imagine all those birds synchronistically flying in the sky. It was as if all humans were united that way. It was like a wolf pack of 8 billion. And so there was a sort of synergy. So all human beings gathered and they started building the great tower of Babel, this tower that was reaching the heavens, trying to reach the level of the gods beyond the clouds. And this tower was reaching it. It was reaching it, as the story says. It was very close to getting there, but then the gods suddenly saw the tower. And what the gods did was that instead of smiting man with lightning, instead of destroying the tower, they destroyed the inner vision of the tower in the minds of the people. And what that means is they fragmented as the story goes, gods gave human beings different languages, so they couldn't speak anymore, you know. And that's the crazy thing, because that's just a story. But when we look at reality now, nations are divided, wars occur, and what is this world? And who are we? So life has a more of an intense meaning, you know? Even Plato says time is the moving image of eternity. I feel we are identifying as temporal beings because we have put away the potential for an energy to be eternal in our subconscious. That means it's like on some level, energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can, in some sense, change. And so what we find is that it's strange. It's like consciousness, it's like awareness, which is awareness is like energy which can't be created or destroyed, but consciousness is like potential energy turning into kinetic. It's the transformation. So it's like, think of it this way. Here's I'll clear it out. I think this is going to unite every theist and atheist ever. And it's simply that we're conscious energy. We are energetic phenomena that is conscious of itself, and it can treat itself through various acknowledgments. The mind is not made so you hear one set of language and go live in that set of thought, live in one's thought structure for a time. The mind is made for piloting, for navigation, for exploring unknown skies and your unknown sky, you know? Because let me tell you, the easiest way to stop an advanced civilization from happening is to make this individual member of that civilization not feel advanced. Do you see what I mean? That means we're already there. So I am, as far as I'm concerned, if we were to design an advanced civilization as a unified species under a new vision, a new language, it would be, it's like we're starting from rock bottom. We're starting from rock bottom. The way I see people live, and the way, like, just walk in the downtown area of some place every day for weeks on end, and you will either accept the inefficiency, or your inner efficiency will fight the outer inefficiency, and then that decision has to be made. So think of it this way. You can think right now as a person that you are a certain object and a certain subject, and you can go on living your whole life as that object, just that object, and that a subjective view on that objective view. But I am saying it changes. That means if the cosmos could speak, its language would be change. I feel our species needs to take a few steps back from take a few steps back from how it has cut up the world into words. The world has become worlds only through words. That means there is one place here. Existence is one room. Whether you consider that room's edge to be space or matter. But it's one room. That means it's a room we can't see the walls, but hey, we can see the floor. We're standing on the floor. We can't see the edge of the universe, but we are standing somewhere in the universe, so our foot's on the ground. It's like when we look at it, if we were to look at it horizontally, there's fog. The mystic is in a fog. If you looked at it vertically, the mystic is not confused. His legs are still on the ground. He knows something. We know that we exist. That's the whole point of our conscious evolution. So we know we exist. It's just that language is possessing the species. That means I feel the first alien that invaded Earth was language, but it was not a sort of evil invasion. It was a symbiosis. What does that mean? That means life eventually changes. That apple that's in the river will go into certain moments, and the body has limitations. That means this can't be ignored. We are like a constantly a picture being endlessly painted by the hand of time. We're like a canvas. Like the mind is like the canvas, the soul is like the emptiness of the canvas, and the body is kind of the how the paintbrush is hitting the canvas and shaping it in every moment. I want to share with you guys a certain story from my science fiction. And as the sages said long ago, a human being can do ultimately two things in life. They can either trust their phenomenological existence, or they can distrust. You can either trust the moment or you cannot trust it. Ultimately, that's all. That's like the basic binary way we're all living. You trust the moment, it moves on. If you distrust the moment, it still moves on, but it just moves on more inefficiently. That means you got to trust your mind before efficiency can enter your life. Because efficiency is making sure that you're conscious and alert enough that your hand is on the steering wheel. And that's kind of my aim, that people have to realize you are piloting your life. You cannot wait for a savior. You cannot be on a highway driving it really fast with your hand on the wheel and suddenly being like, I don't want to drive anymore. I wish someone could come and save me and drive for me. All the passengers would be like, holy shit, man, hold the wheel. So that's the thing. It is full appreciation of the conscious evolutionary opportunity. That means if you appreciate, I'm not saying this appreciation is going to be through joy or it's going to be through sorrow. I'm just saying if you as a human being appreciate what is, and how there's an instantaneity to attention, occurrence, existence, it's like it's playful. That means there is no strict law. There's a playfulness to this life. That's why there's like that. In other words, there's multiple elevations. And let me tell you, so many doors in this world will be locked for you unless you understand why authenticity means accept your design. You cannot abide by your true nature if there is an inkling of resistance. That means I have looked at this world, and suddenly I have in that moment my attention evoked the kind of various dimensions of history. I suddenly something became subjectively beautiful for me. It was a simple object, but in the way it was, in the way kind of like I saw that phenomena, it was, how can I tell you? It was like the shadow of a leaf on a ground on asphalt, you know and the shadow of the leaf and the light hitting the leaf, and how there was a sort of iridescence to the sunlight hitting the leaf and me being able to see underneath the leaf and the shadow it made. So for example, that memory comes to me now, and the iridescence of it was the awakening to the unknown. That means I'm telling you, intelligence is not just what you're holding. That means if you the educational system is treating people right now like their brains are backpacks, and all right, fill them up. Fill them up and carry this stuff for the rest of your life. And you know how tired you would be if you carry an unnecessary backpack with things that are always getting updated. For me, I think the educational system got it wrong. The educational system should not be teaching, it should be exploring. That means it's as if it's like, how can I tell you? The, the educational system should be something that if a child is born, they will feel that by entering that educational system, the advancement of their exploration will have a utility. That means it's like think of it this way: the educational system should become like the Night's Watch, where they maybe this is not the best kind of metaphor, but it should be like the Night's Watch, where it sends exhibitions, sends teams outside to go and explore the unknown. So that kind of exploring unit, I feel that should be implemented on a mass way in the subjective realm. So that means I want to see how children play video games like Call of Duty occurring for the exploration of the subjective landscapes that hold all our education as a species. So I want to see the same enthusiasm that children have in meaningless digital pixels, in having it in knowledge. So I think the best thing the educational system can do is become a sort of uh, the person leaving the educational system should feel honored, not honored because of competition. That's a low kind of honor. Anybody, by the way, if you're competing 24/7, it's gonna mess you up because your attention is on others and their outcomes. You know, one can say truth doesn't get any simpler or harder. Truth is, but when it comes to how would I say, like sometimes, guys, I get an emotion, but I can't find the word for it. I think it's too much competition is like staring into the abyss, Nietzschean style. That means Friedrich Nietzsche says those who stare at the abyss long enough, the abyss stares back at them. Something like that. And that means that when your attention is on the unknown too much, you can remain there. Sometimes I'll tell you something, it's a bit freaky to consider, but these yogis that went into samadhi and they closed their eyes and they just sat there and suddenly they were in a samadhi for a long time, let me tell you, your identity cannot exist without movement and without generating some sort of noise. Okay, so when these yogis would go and sit in samadhi, strangely as the even in mythically, I feel it's possible, but it's like they would go into meditation and samadhi for many years sometimes. That would mean non-dual being. That would mean they are not a person. If you don't move too much, your the animate forces are like muscle like. You have to move them. I guess I should do justice to this talk and I guess begin explaining how I have kind of found, at least through my own personal experience, an approach of a recognition of a way of identifying with the unknown. You see, at first you got to look at the chessboard before you play chess. First, you got to understand the environment that given access. What that means is your eyes have opened as a being, and you have access to a certain range of perception. Now, these perceptions, what's even cool about them is there's a hovering, attributeless attention, a witness, always in consciousness, that this witness is there to see things change. That means without mind, we would not be conscious of change. So the mind is strangely here to perceive change. Now, when we speak about dimensions, we have to speak, we're talking about shapes. It's like suddenly if we were sighting the void, and now we're discussing, like how there's a triangular dimension, there's a circular dimension, there's a dimension of the square, and so we our mind is trying to see a shape to the overall structure of vision. That means pretty much dimensions came into existence because the creature wondered, what is here, what's happening here. It's like anybody who wondered who they are was became a philosopher. So kind of what I'm saying is we had to have an initial point of reference. That means if we say in 2020 the identity of the human being is sophisticated and complex, we would go like and wonder about its simpler forms. We would see the identity was the navigation of attention. So when you realize it's how attention is cutting the cake of phenomenology into subjects, into dimensions, then we can talk about. Then it's like we open it up to the masses to wonder about multidimensional models of the maintenance of not just civilization of objective visions, but also the grandeur of subjectivity. That means it's like, why do we have thoughts? You know, it's another way of saying, why is the apple moving in the river, or why is the river moving the apple? It's very fascinating. If you were to, I thought about it in a strange way, guys. I thought about, I'm going to get into this multidimensionality where I'm going to explain to you. I mean, I've explained it before. If you've heard it, you can tune out of the talk, but it's the zero dimension, one dimension, two dimension, infinite dimension. So zero, one to infinity. So Sorry, guys. I'm a bit energetically turbulent. I think it was Lewis Carroll. Yeah, Lewis Carroll, who said something like the mind. It's like he saw it as a sieve where creativity was poured into it, and like from every part of the sieve, it was kind of made into various subjects. Sorry, guys. I'm just a bit sick today. Here, I'll say this. Everything is oscillating between the known and the unknown, between being nothing and being something. Our attention is a sort of presence. It's like and the axis of the known and the unknown is kind of like the center of the axis of the unknown and the unknown. And when it comes to dimensions, I thought first it's important to acknowledge the space, the space where phenomena is in. Then it's important to acknowledge how the phenomena, a singular phenomena, arose in the space. Then how the singular, in its in it multiplying and evolving, became dualistic. And the dualistic is the the I say the zero dimension, one dimension, and the two dimension. Okay, so the second that duality is kind of like after there was space, after there was something in the space, the thing in the space then became kind of having an acknowledgement of the good and the bad and the kind of shadow and the light, and the various dualistic frameworks came into picture. These dualistic frameworks became a way where the human being could, through a simulation of language, continue the value of reality. So you can say our minds are through, I don't know, speech, writing, and all those philosophers and writers in history. It was a way of kind of keeping the past alive for the eyes of the future, which to them was their legacy, but to the future was a gift. So, anyways, language is in the second dimension. Now, where do we go beyond language? This is, I think, one of those great questions for 2020. Every person with a philosophical view should wonder. That if we are creatures that were objects, and now we became kind of subjectively conscious of how we're an object, right? So where do we go beyond subjectivity? That means so far, when I look at evolution, okay, an object evolved into a subject to itself. So this subject, where is it going to evolve to? and it's at like the edge of the road, at the edge of language, where I call it the language threshold. At the edge of language, we're reaching a point where we cannot, there is no identity. But what is there instead? There is rhythms and flows. Rhythms. So what does that mean? That means, imagine one bird flying alone, and that's a mind. Now imagine suddenly, like, or let's give another example, like fish in an ocean suddenly tapping into a current in the ocean, and all those fish are moving in that current together, right? So the current becomes the identity of the phenomenology's movement. Right now it's narratives and stories that we are somehow picturing our identities through. But I'm saying that beyond the dualistic dimension, why do I say it's infinite? People are going to be like, what about the three dimension? I'm saying, yeah, the moment you have duality, duality is the kind of, you can create infinity with duality. You need, like, how can I tell you? And after you have duality, you can access infinity. After you observe how dualistic phenomena is there, then you go in a state of mind where throughout the day, it's strangely, I'm going to use the geometrical kind of shape to kind of define this. For me, by the way, guys, I consider geometry to be the next great language of all languages. You know. Okay, so so guys, I'm just gonna finish one last point on this, and then my attention is gonna come to the chat section. So after we acknowledge duality, we come to the language threshold. The language threshold is a true sign of intelligence. I find anybody who considers it. What does that mean? That means you are noticing that there are things in the domain of experience that cannot be put into the domain of language. So you're literally noticing an experience that has no words for yet. It's like a non-dual experience. Okay? And so when it comes to infinity, that means how would we be creatures that access infinity? We cannot access infinity as an idea. An idea is trapped in the dualistic realm. The wheel of karma spins for you because language has divided the world for you. You know. So beyond language, I say you'd require an awareness of, how can I tell you? It's the singular and the dualistic, and that which is aware of the singular and dualistic is like an attention, a field of attention where those rhythms are. I don't know how to say it. It's like we're reverse engineering our identities back into rivers of just how the cosmos is moving, is one phenomenological movement. So, but we're doing this with identity. So it's like the person says, okay, I identify with this body. And then the person's like, whoa, 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 what about the mind though? So he's like, okay, I identify with the mind. It's like, whoa, 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 what about the soul though? You know, it's like, and then you're like, okay, 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 I identify with the soul. And then like, whoa, whoa, whoa. It's like, whoa, whoa, what about emptiness? And the guy's like, okay, okay, I identify with emptiness. And that at the end, where are you left? You are left in literally some a state where there is no comment. You can't comment. It's just being, and that being is it's how can I tell you? It's like it's like two sides of a coin. On one side of the coin, the dualistic, the singular, the void. On the other side of the coin, infinity. And we have to realize we are creatures that are in the relationship of observer and object, observer and subject, you know? So it's like, what is knowledge? It's you're observing how objects have been treated in history, subjective, as more with like what images were linked to that phenomena. Because we can't forget, language is symbol attribution. and it's certain laws. So for me, our language is a certain sequence of, it's like a law. That means it's like if you're to speak a language, it's like you have to be familiar with the words, right? The words are like the images. um, yeah. So welcome to the chat, Infinite Thoughts. I'm honestly noticing a uniqueness of creativity in of many people who engage the chat section with their YouTube channel names. Yeah. So welcome, Infinite Thoughts from Sydney. Nice. You say Nelson Henderson says, Hen- Henderson says the true meaning of life is to plant trees under whose shade you do not expect to sit. Yeah. Um, so space, as we explained, is the balanced three-dimensional extent in which objects and events have relative position and direction. Okay, so infinite thoughts. I would say trying to define space would be trying to explain how non-existence exists. It can be like that, you know. So you say, can you get back to the past, infinity in this life? So what do you mean? So guys, I'm engaging the chat section here. If you just tuned in. Okay, so infinite thoughts. I think I know what you mean, but I don't. I'm telling you, infinity is not linear. So past is a linear sense of time. So I'm telling you, imagine you go in a state where there is you don't need to get to the past, you don't need to get to the future. You're witnessing phenomenology instantly as one moment. So for me, we got to realize language is a symbol. It's like a world inside a world. And when we identify with that world inside the world, we are the true world we're standing in becomes inefficient. This is why, for example, there's cruelty and suffering, and it's strange because sometimes I wonder if language hadn't developed, how much human beings would help each other. And I feel that if they were in a natural environment, the environment wants to thrive. That means it's like, think of it this way. The person sits right now and goes on YouTube, Google, accesses a lot of data. But back in the day, a creature in a forest, what data did it have access to? Everything that was alive in its environment. So it had a evolutionary need to pay attention to the moment. We have found, currently I find, civilization is so inefficiently designed that we don't feel inspired to do anything for it. And we gonna it's not just civilized, it's like you can't point to a government without pointing to its people. That means you can't blame a government without blaming the people. This is why when people get angry at the politicians, I'm like, what are you doing? Like, I understand we need to fight corruption, but I'm saying, like, the system is designed to have separate victories first rather than a collective victory, so there will never be the collective victory. And I find this to be a true. This is in my own personal analysis of. I think this is one of those very incredible things that should be taught, or maybe it is being taught, and I just don't know. Somebody said it before in history, but it's like I have this vision that a governing system. When you think of a political system, that political system, how can I tell you? can never be as up to date as the most up to date citizen it has. Therefore, the government system cannot represent anybody, right? So to have a single decision maker for a collective multidimensional system from one dimension of perception only decisions being made seems inefficient. So what does that mean? That means we as a civilization either continue inefficiently or we start telling ourselves a new story. We start re-evoking the world we see with different values, you know? I remember a friend of mine, uh, she was talking about, what do you call it? Overpopulation. She was talking about overpopulation, and we got to a point where I was telling her it's like, sure, there is overpopulation, but you got to consider some factors here. First of all, if we build sky cities, we will access three-dimensional space living wise. Right now, it's strange. It's like we're three-dimensional creatures, but our feet are only in two dimensions on the surface of the earth. So if we could use all this space in the air, that could be a solution to overpopulation, you know, and also in interstellar solutions too. But I'm saying it's like another way approach is that it's not just bodies here. It's not just overpopulated with just biological existence. It's there is also minds that awaken on this plane. 8 billion pilots navigating their plane of existence. There's nothing more remarkable. We are the greatest entertainment for the whole cosmos if they were to see that on a rock in the middle of nowhere, we are attempting to contemplate eternity. You know, guys, I'm gonna kind of go in a quote tunnel of time. I think this is something incredible to do right now. So, guys, quote tunnel is part of is a section of these. It's like a part of the episode, like the talk, where I dive into a bunch of quotes. I read a bunch of quotes of either a unique person in history or a theme. So today I'm going to look at the theme time, and we're just going to kind of see how other human beings in history, how language, how their inner realms appeared to them. You know. So let's get into this. Okay. Just a second, guys. Actually, I'm gonna bring something else up. Time. Abraham Lincoln says, "You can fool all the people some of the time, and some of the people all the time, but you cannot fool all the people all the time." You know, it's hard being a politician, guy. William Shakespeare says, "All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts, his acts being seven ages. Steve Jobs says, "My favorite things in life don't cost any money. It's really clear that the most precious resource we all have is time." Yeah, that's very true. Marcus Aurelius says, "Time is a sort of river of passing events, and strong is its current. No sooner is a thing brought to sight than it is swept by, and another takes its place. And this too will be swept away." Yeah, that's the thing, guys. This is why I've spoken about time. Like I remember writing, it's not complete, but I wrote the story, A Conqueror Named Time, right? And pretty much time conquers anything. It conquers everything. Stephen Wright says, "I went to a restaurant that serves breakfast at any time, so I ordered French toast. So I ordered French toast during the Renaissance." Martin Luther King Jr. says, "We must use time creatively." Benjamin Franklin says, "You may delay, but time will not." Dr. Seuss says, "How did it get so late so soon? It's night before it's afternoon. December is here before it's June. My goodness, how the time has flown. How did it get so late so soon?" How did it get so late so soon? Wow. It's fascinating, guys. Sometimes some writers can capture emotions of human beings that have not been put to words, you know. My respect for Dr. Seuss just increased. You know? Mary Kay Ash says, "No matter how busy you are, you must take time to make the other person feel important." Albert Einstein says, I have just got a new theory of eternity." I have just got a new theory of eternity. Lost time is never found again. Benjamin Franklin says that. Benjamin Franklin also says time is money, which is definitely shaded, like a false quote, maybe. Albert Einstein says the only reason for time is so that everything doesn't happen at once. Exactly. I can believe Einstein saying that. Because time is the free will's effort to see a moment in different ways. William Shakespeare says, like as the waves make towards the pebbled shore, so do our minutes hasten to their end." Shakespeare says, "Better 3 hours too soon than a minute too late." Shakespeare says, "We are time's subjects, and time bids be gone." Henry David Thoreau says, "Time is but the stream I go a fishing in." Okay. John F. Kennedy says, "We must use time as a tool, not as a couch." Wow. Malcolm X says, "In all our deeds, the proper value and respect for time determines success or failure." George Bernard Shaw says, "Everything happens to everybody sooner or later if there is time enough." Bertrand Russell says, "The time you enjoy wasting is not wasted time." Really, guys, I'm going to just pause it here and say, when it comes to time, I remember in York University there was a picture on a wall of a bunch of people dancing around the fire. All the people had corporate suits, and um, their heads were made of clocks. And it's like time is ticking for all of us, and we're occupied in various activities. And what is the efficiency of these activities? Khalil Gibran says, "Time has been transformed, and we have changed. It has advanced and set us in motion. It has unveiled its face, inspiring us with bewilderment and exhilaration." C.S. Lewis says, "The future is something which everyone reaches at the rate of 60 minutes an hour." Whatever he does, whoever he is. Da Vinci says time abides long enough for those who make use of it. Leonardo da Vinci says time stays long enough for anyone who will use it. Henry Ford says most people spend more time and energy going around problems than in trying to solve them. Emily Dickinson says forever is composed of nows. N-O-W-S, he says. She says. St. Augustine says, what then is time? If no one asks me, I know what it is. If I wish to explain it to him who asks, I do not know. Napoleon Hill says, don't wait. The time will never be just right. Bruce Lee says, if you spend too much time thinking about a thing, you'll never get it done. Thomas Paine says, time makes more converts than reason. Sophocles says, old age and the passage of time teach all things. Coco Chanel says, don't spend time beating on a wall, hoping to transform it into a door. Aeschylus says, but time growing old teaches all things. Francis Bacon says, friends are thieves of time. Okay, poor guy didn't have good friends. Yeah. Aeschylus says, time brings all things to pass. Sophocles says, hide nothing, for time which sees all and hears all exposes all. Let me see if there's one more I can read. Elon Musk says, it would take 6 months to get to Mars if you go there slowly with optimal energy costs. Then it would take 18 months for the planets to realign. Then it would take 6 months to get back, though I can see getting the travel time down to 3 months pretty quickly if America has the will. Okay. That's important, guys. Elon Musk is he's a guy who should be unconditionally helped in any way. Yeah, guys, so that was the quote tunnel for time. Evidently, there's time moves very differently for many people. Awareness to our subjective realms can make us feel we're only objective, can make us feel we're more than just objective. Pilot your attention, navigate your existence through a value for your own experience. That's the healthiest thing, I think. And yeah, the shadow of time. Hafez has this quote where he says, truth is like a sun that hits many objects, and as truth hits all these many objects, it creates endless shadows. And of course, he was kind of saying like, infinity is the shadow of God. Wow. Wow. I think he didn't say that, but I think that's what he meant. Infinity is the shadow of God. Wow. And the finite is the object and the light is the unknown. So it's kind of like an unknown unknown light is hitting a known object, and this known object is creating what do you call it, endless shadows. So I can kind of say this, a subject is the shadow of an object, but the awareness of the object and its shadow is beyond the language and the form. So anyways, guys, I hope this talk was helpful, and thanks for tuning in. A civilization that breathes with a collective conscious freedom as a context, I'm telling you, experience, trust your experience, let it be a source of unknown fascination for you. Because I'm telling you, there's some things in this life that I could totally understand objective desire. I could even understand like all those people who care about the future too much, that's a sort of subjective desire. But when it comes to what is actually here, an instant moment of sight where all is. Our mind is being our moment. Our moment is being our mind. We are not just part of the cosmos, we are the presence of all of it. Okay, well, welcome to the chat, Aurora. Um, so, guys, Aurora says, my son asked me when he was 6, Mama, why does time go so fast when I'm having fun? Yeah, because the attention is on the experience, not its subjective linearity. That means this is a kind of cool thing. We have to look at our watch. So that means it's not naturally, it's not something of nature. Time is not a natural idea. Even though it's a development of natural beings, but I'm saying it's like that's a very conscious thing for a child to say. You know, there is a chaotic explanation that the most chaotic explanation is there's no such thing as time. We project it into what we require from it. You know, so there is a way of kind of suddenly seeing the hollowness of language, which can inspire you to be grateful for what's here. You know. Okay, so you think welcome. So, anyways, guys, yeah, it is. Time is I mean, when Plato said time is the moving image of eternity, I mean, at that point, like, time could be a shadow of eternity. Pretty much, I think if there was a sort of kind of blueprint to this, kind of, I guess, metaphysical um, um, introspection, I would say it's like, okay, sight, there's awareness, there's a self. Now, this awareness to the self is evoking value in this self. And when you realize, just like how the young child can look at an object, imagine like a 2 year old child, I don't know, like a really young child who has made a teddy bear into its best friend. So that child has taken that toy and given it life in its mind. The toy is alive to it, to the child. So I feel we as a species have taken subjects and we have given it life, you know? We have made ourselves alive in the subjective realms. That's the individuality, you know? That means even though I speak about a lot of collectivity, kind of this kind of collective conscious evolution and whatnot, but I'm telling you, it's like the beautiful thing about life is not that all the colors have to be one color, which I feel that's what a belief does to the world. but a kind of blind belief, you know. But it's like all the colors are the intelligence of it. When Hafez, the Sufi mystic poet, said, "Your heart and my heart are very old friends," what he meant is that we came from the same environment and our heart beat with the rhythms of the environment. And now, in modern civility, our environments have become the responsibility of our free will, but before they were nature's. Nature was moving the imagination. Now, a subjective position of attention is. And so, Aurora, I would say something incredible that I suggest to any person that's a parent is that I noticed something that, of course, when somebody cares for someone, they want to do the best, they want to give the most, right? But I noticed that children, more than the parents, like the parents should just change the ratio of giving answers and asking questions. I think one of the greatest thing you can do is ask a question, you know, ask a question from children, you know. And when you ask a question, you're giving the permission to whatever it has held in its inner realms to externalize, you know. That means question and then be a silent audience for your child, and that would make your child be comfortable with its expression, with its intelligence, you know. And sometimes asking a question means the child starts saying how the world looks like before the parent does. So then the parent quietly can learn and see, okay, this is how the child is looking at the world. You know, is it proper? Is it not proper? Like, you know what I mean? Then the discretion of the parent comes in, but there has to be a freedom for the young child to feel it is okay to be itself. Any child at a young age doesn't feel it's okay to be itself will go on missing out on many moments of life because their sense of worth never externalized easy. So they will feel it's not easy to be themselves outside, you know? So this is why it's like asking a question and having the child use language to think about the environment, you know? It's like even simple things. It's like imagine like I say this. Imagine like I mean, of course I'm not a parent, but these are just suggestions. I mean, these are just viewpoints. Entertain them, take them playfully, and of course, don't forget about your own free will. But what I'm saying is that um, a question is an allowance for the other to animate the moment. So uh, I see. Um, my attention goes to the importance of freedom before discipline. Now, I heard something hilarious when I visited Iran, where I was born in 2016. I went to visit my grandmother, and my family was there with my grandmother, and we're then in that moment we're watching TV, and in the TV there's a TV series happening, and the grandmother in that film was saying in that the TV was on, and that TV show was saying something, said something that it made me suddenly laugh, you know, and it kind of like was a burst of humor for me. And what it was is the old lady in the TV show was saying, if you don't hit your kids now, you will have to hit yourself later. And that explained to me kind of the discipline, kind of how like the much older generations were raised. That means they felt like you have to make this discipline clear early on before the child wonders about its freedom, because the child will not attain the freedom if there is no discipline, you know. That means you can say a healthy mind is a mind that can communicate but that can also receive communication, right? So that's when discipline comes in, when the parent is wondering about how the child is receiving the world, you know, and receiving its own inner state, right? um, so so there was this kind of older notion, discipline first then freedom, but I'm telling you, the mind is more freedom is more important than discipline now, you know. Freedom is more freedom is sorry guys, I'm seeing Aurora's comment here in the chat section. Yeah, so they had this notion of parenting where discipline first, because it's a rough time, you need to have that inner strength kind of built at an earlier age. You know, that means it's like, what is better? A person, imagine like you open your eyes and you're on some battlefield and everybody's going in and you're part of that going in. It's kind of, I'm using that as a metaphor for life. So what do? You have to go with some sense of stability. You know, that means the kind of it's like a definition of order is in a space where there is chaotic movement of stuff. The person stabilizes one thing, you know, and to create great order, you require a lot of ability to stabilize many views, and not views, or many points of attention, you know. So anyways, what I'm kind of suggesting, let me just get to this point. I should let myself get to this point. The mind is unknown, and it has potential. It has various potential, you know. And I feel a person develops that inner strength only through their own victories, micro victories before their macro victory. So it's as if you're going through endless micro victories and micro failures, but you're thinking about, it's like you're winning, you're going through various battles, but the war is not over. Do you know what I mean? Think of it this way. It's like I feel somehow, because the world is so vast, in our subconscious we are reacting to this vastness and emptiness, and we are overwhelmed subconsciously, but we live as simple calm people in civilization, you know. But there is a sort of subconscious intensity. Now that subconscious intensity, the person's response to it is through building, putting something in the void. You know, it's like the artist's retaliation against the kind of empty canvas was to throw paint on it. You know, I want to read for you guys, Randolph, something about Khalil Gibran, this Lebanese, I believe, poet. He was, in my mind, he was a man who managed to share the genius of his inner realms with the world. Like, he's an incredible poet. And he says, he has this poem called Your Children. So I'm going to read you this poem that he is called, pretty much what Khalil Gibran has said about this idea. So Aurora, from the chat section, if you're listening, I hope you hear this, because this is Khalil Gibran's kind of vision. His inner realms are very. Anyways, I'll read it for you. The poem is called Your Children. Your children are not your children. They are the sons and daughters of life's longing for itself. They come through you, but not from you. And though they are with you, they belong not to you. You may give them your love, but not your thoughts, for they have their own thoughts. You may house their bodies, but not their souls, for their souls dwell in the house of tomorrow, which you cannot visit, not even in your dreams. You may strive to be like them, but seek not to make them like you, for life goes not backward, nor tarries with yesterday. You are the bows, like an archery bow. Like he says, you are the bows from which your children, as living arrows, are sent forth. Why is sorry guys, this I'm looking at a picture of the quote and it's missing something. Okay, sorry, here I'll read that part again. You are the bows from which your children as living arrows are sent forth. The archer sees the mark upon the path of the infinite, and he bends you with his might, that his arrows may go swift and far. Let your bending in the archer's hand be for gladness, for even as he loves the arrow that flies, so he loves also the bow that is stable. So pretty much Khalil Gibran is doing something ingenious, and he's metaphorizing the parent and child relationship as the child is an arrow and the parent is the bow, and the parent cannot decide the direction of the child, right? So that's why I'm saying freedom is more important than discipline, because discipline could be uh, giving past ideas to the child, do you know? It's like I think we should treat children like respectful with the respect as if they are aliens. Let me tell you why. Because it's like imagine there was an alien on the street. You in some sense like I'm just saying like their inner realms are too unique for the past to disturb. That means if you don't care for the children of the world, it means you don't even care for when you were a child. That means you don't even care for your inner child. And the future generation is built by these children. That means if for me, it's as if they come and tell me like, if I think Socrates was wiser or a child that was born like yesterday, I would say the child that was born as yesterday is endlessly wiser just by the nature, just the nature of of kind of the responsibility that the mind requires for the world, the ability to respond to a 4 billion year old science project called civilization. I honestly feel there's a much human beings are not objects and they're not subjects, and that they're living phenomena that moves constantly develops and evolves through known and unknown conditions. So really it's like it's not people are not like a puzzle where if you it's not they're not like a Rubik's cube where you find one algorithm and you can just say all right, this one algorithm is going to work for everyone. There's a sort of uniqueness of as if all of existence is a garden, and in this garden there's various different plants, and the beauty of the garden is in all of these plants existing. That means it's like how weird would that gardener be who's just watering all the plants except one plant? It's like how much of a kind of cruel person would you be? Deluded cruelty, I would call that. So you see, it's like you water the whole field, and civilization is a field of various knowers of activity. These knowers of activity, if we consider they can't be symbolic or linguistic, then it's as if like it's an unknown field of activity, but the activity is known to itself at a certain limited range. Sorry, guys, this is taking longer than I expected. YouTube has this kind of 200 count word thing at a time, and I've already committed to this. Okay, there we go. So thanks for tuning in, guys. I feel I've reached the thing, the end of the talk. Um, the mind is the most valuable resource. It is the direction of activity, and it is the most. It is the only. It is the opportunity to experience advancement. Evolution is an opportunity to experience advancement. These three words that I'm going to say, um, they have come to me like a kind of echo from the cries of history. That means there's an emotion when the individual life's desires are completed. There comes desires of the collective life. These desires of the collective life beyond just the family sense. I'm talking about a collectivity where it's as if the advancement of the species becomes so exciting that discrimination against people, against each other, becomes a waste of time. Violence is seen as inferior activity. It's not seen as good or bad. It's just like inefficient. It's only, you know what I mean? Something like that. And the words that came to me were rise, mankind, rise. Those three words are explain the vision of civilization. I see. That it has to rise, it has to consciously lift itself into its advancement. And those in parent psychology, those people who punish their kids, even though sometimes it gives them discipline, but it also gives it gives them experiences of an internal an authorization to be themselves. Anyways, thanks for tuning in.